Welcome to the February 11th, 2026 joint meeting with the Commission and the City Council. That's a study session, so no action or no deliberation will take place during the first meeting. Second meeting is the Park Commission business meeting, and we'll have a short recess between the two meetings, about 15 minutes, so the council and mayor can leave and we can settle back in for our business meeting. Roll call, please.
Councilor Sharrow?
Here.
Councilor Bloom?
Here.
Commissioner Adams?
Here.
Councilor Hanson?
Here.
Councilor Duquesne? Here. Commissioner Lant?
Here.
Mayor Graham?
Here.
Commissioner Bachman?
Here.
Councilor Dale?
Here.
Commissioner Gardner?
Here.
City Manager Cotta?
Here.
And I guess Johan too? No? Okay, never mind.
I just want to note that Commissioner Weiner is not here, and I understand that Councilor Kaplan will be zooming in, but he didn't respond. So, okay, I'm going to now ask Mayor Graham to lead us in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Councilor Dale, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Certainly, Chair. We acknowledge and honor the Aboriginal people on whose ancestral homelands we work, the Akira Kutsum Band of the Shasta Nation, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. We honor the first stewards in the Rogue Valley and the lands we love and depend on, tribes with ancestral lands in and surrounding the geography of the Ashland watershed, including the original past, present, and future Indigenous inhabitants of the Shasta, Takelma, and Athabascans people. We also recognize and acknowledge the Shasta village of Quakaka, where the crow lights that is now the Ashland City Plaza.
Thank you. That brings us to our third item, which is the quarterly financial update, and the interim finance director, Bryn Morrison, will be presenting that.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. Are you not here? It's all right.
Looks like the other one on there stood up.
Can you hear us?
You just
Oh, it needs to be read.
Now you too.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and Parks Commissioners. Bryn Morrison, Interim Finance Director. Tonight, we're going to be going over the second quarter of the financial update, as well as the utility billing receivable update, as well as an update to the forecast that was presented to Council on December 1st at the retreat. So within the packet, you have your second quarter financials, which is a summary of fund balances, the summary of revenues and expenditures citywide, the statement of resources, requirements, and charges in fund balance, or excuse me, changes in fund balance, as well as a summary of cash and investments. This chart shows the revenue for the city year over year for the second quarter. Overall, there was a $3.4 million increase compared. The largest chunk of that would be for taxes, and that is because of the increase to the public safety support fee, the wildfire reduction fee, and the initiation of the parks fee. In the taxes category is also the food and beverage tax and the transient lodging tax. Food and beverage is showing at a 12.5% increase from the previous year. And what that is mostly contributed to is right now the city is undergoing an audit of the previous fiscal year. And we do have some delinquent providers who are paying their delinquent taxes, and they're receipted in for this quarter. And also the change for transient lodging tax is 14.8% increase from the prior year. The food and beverage and the transient lodging tax are due in October, the end of October, so that's why you see it on this quarter report rather than the previous one. Property tax is also due, the largest chunk in November, to the city, so that's why you'll see it is included as well in this quarterly report, and it is 3.6% increase from the prior year, which holds kind of true to what we would expect. We have heard from the county, though, that collection is down overall to 93%, which we typically budget 96%, so that is something that we will watch. Licenses and permits, system development charges, as mentioned before, we'll continue to monitor that activity. It's increased slightly since last quarter, but not holding to where we had budgeted at this point. But as we have talked about before, it is not something that we compare quarter to quarter. It's more of a longer term comparison to see how the activity is happening. So intergovernmental revenue, it's higher than the previous year due to some grant revenue that we received. A large portion is the Public Works tap system upgrades. That was a grant we received, as well as reimbursement for our assistance to other jurisdictions due to the fires that had happened around the area. Charges for services has increased as expected due to the rate increases as well as the miscellaneous fees and charges increases. Interest on investments, this has decreased compared to the previous year. Historically, it is higher than it has been, not nearly as high as last year, but it is remaining a little bit higher than what we had seen historically. We are adjusting our forecast coming later in the meeting to show that the interest earnings will decrease due to our ending fund balances decreasing in the future. Miscellaneous revenue, looking at it, had the highest percentage increase, although it's small, because we had a large sale of our clean fuel credits, as well as our decommissioned assets in the equipment fund. We use a agency that helps us sell our vehicles when they are no longer useful for the city, which has been actually a tremendous benefit for the city. We used to have an auction and we no longer have that. We actually go through a government agency in order to do that now. This is a chart on expenditures year over year for the second quarter. And there actually is minimal change compared to the prior year, the same time period. The second quarter of the fiscal year should be, if we are holding true, 50% of the year. However, we do see fluctuations from time to time due to capital projects, due to debt service payment requirements, but personal services are at 45% of the budget right now. Excuse me, as of December 31st. Materials and services, 48.2% of the budget. Debt services trending as expected based upon the repayment schedules. And then capital outlay is trending as expected based upon the timing of projects. We've been able to initiate some projects, so that has trended as we would have expected at this point. The city's net position, citywide, 88.8 million versus 90.8 million from the previous year, the fund balances. The general fund is lower than the previous year as anticipated as part of the budget process. We did anticipate spending down our fund balance. Water fund, as I just mentioned, due to their projects going forward, they have spent down some of their ending fund balance. The equipment fund is higher due to the sale of those assets, as well as timing on when they're able to purchase vehicles. We'll bring to council in March the transfer appropriation request for the capital improvement fund for the Pioneer Hall and the community center overruns, and that would be a transfer from the general fund. And we are still estimating that to be about $200,000. But with closing the books for January still taking place, we will not know a firm number until we bring it to council. cash and investments is very similar to the prior year at this same time. It's only a minimal change. Do we have any questions on that portion before I move on?
Counselor Dale?
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Bryn, could you go back one slide if you don't mind? So if you, maybe this is something for you and Sabrina to maybe give us an idea about on the capital improvement fund, the concern we had to transfer from the general fund for the cost overrun. Is there any timing that we may be having a discussion coming up about how we might be able to separate capital from the general fund so that we can have a better idea of how the general fund is trending realistically without having the ups and downs of capital expenditures that might be one time or unexpected or so forth?
I can. So yes, we will be bringing to council a policy revision for several funds, and capital improvement fund is one, to where we do need to look at the capital expenditures truly living within the capital improvement fund and adequately funding that.
And the ballpark for when that might be coming to council?
I don't know quite yet. I would think within the fiscal year, though, we would have that discussion.
Great. Thank you.
Commissioner Adams? Your light's on. Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Bryn. We've heard some reoccurring themes here. Income is down, expenses are up. When we look specifically at the ending fund balance for 88 million versus 90, those reasons, right? Mm-hmm. Income is down, expenses are up. Year over year, that seems like a pretty big number to me. Are those types of discrepancies abnormal, or how concerned should we be about a $2 million swing?
It is overall part of the larger picture that we've discussed with, for instance, specifically the general fund. Building the budget to use the ending fund balance has occurred over the prior few years. Mm-hmm. So that is definitely something that we do need to keep in mind. We are within our budgetary compliance. We are not out of budgetary compliance. So this was all part of how we built the budget going into this biennium.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Mayor Graham?
Counselor Kaplan has his hand raised.
Oh, so Kaplan.
Let's use the lights. Counselor Duquesne?
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Actually, Bryn, you kind of touched on my question about the ending fund balance. It's my understanding that in our last biennium, we used the ending fund balance to actually balance this budget, correct?
Correct.
And then you mentioned future ending fund balances, and looking at what was given to us, it's not looking too good. So I guess my question would be, how does that look moving forward into the next biennium? Because we cannot, doesn't look like we can depend on our ending fund balances to get us there.
Well, and that's part of the continuing our forecasting. We do need to update it going forward, making sure that we do have the correct trending going forward and the known assumptions within those forecasts. And then there needs to be some decisions made.
I look forward to moving forward with that because we have to look at the big picture before we get there.
Right.
Thank you.
Counselor Bloom?
Yeah, thank you. To the CIP essentially. So we were over on Pioneer and Community Center, right? And that's coming out of the general fund into CIP.
Correct.
What was the total amount for Community Center and Pioneer Hall that came out of the general fund for that?
We haven't moved it yet.
Beyond the 200.
Beyond it,
Right.
I'm not sure of it. We'd have
Okay.
to have
Because
to look at the project costs in total.
My understanding is it wasn't the total construction cost for Pioneer and Community Center didn't come out of a dedicated CIP, right? Part of that came out of the general fund, more than the 200,000 overage,
Yes,
correct?
correct.
Okay.
Part.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mayor Graham, and then Counselor Kaplan.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up behind Councilor Duquesne's question and comment, that the the whole series of conversations that the council has set in motion that we started with in December at our session to take up the questions of cost reductions and other alternative revenue sources, that whole process that will roll out over the course of this year is what we will use to address the trend lines that Bryn is sharing with us tonight. So there's a lot of conversations that are still coming to this council on both sides of the ledger, and that's how we will turn these trend lines that we are concerned about into that sustainable financial future that we're looking for.
Thank you. Councillor Kaplan.
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes. Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thanks, Bryn, for this. And I have a question on that same last slide that you showed of the the aggregate ending fund balances of dropping about $2 million since last year. What does this also reflect the uncollected utility account receivables or was that already in the previous last year's numbers? Did you already go back and correct last year's numbers for the same period?
So no, we don't correct months once the months have closed. The correction, the process for the delinquent processing and reconciliation was done as part of the year-end audited report, so it was part of the June number. So you are correct that it would be truly, if we did month to month, it would have been a different comparison, recognizing the utility.
And that uncollected balance was $2.4 million or something, is that about right?
2.7.
$2.7 million. So, and what is the difference between the aggregate ending fund balances now and the ending fund balance? I can't see it on the screen right now.
$2 million.
$2 million. So in fact, that's a big part of the explanation. And obviously there are things going in and coming out. Mm-hmm. Now that hits the utilities differently than it does the general fund. What was the difference in the general fund?
2.1.
2.1. So
difference.
And difference.
Mm-hmm.
And of which the delinquent utilities or the electric utility tax was about $500,000.
The electric utility, the electric fund, the change from this December 31st to December 31st of 24 was $290,000 difference.
Much less. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. And I appreciate the questions about the segregating the truly capital from operating expenses that are in the general fund. I think that's also a really important way for us to manage this going forward.
Okay, anybody who hasn't spoken want to say something at this point? Then we'll continue.
Thank you. As part of the quarterly reports, it has been requested that we also include updates on the low-income assistance programs. And right now, as of December 31st, we had 454 qualified customers. We have a threshold of $400. Once they reach it, they are no longer qualified for the 30% discount. We've had 12 customers reach that. Of the 200 and eyesight, we have spent or allocated towards them 72,000 of the 263, roughly $1,000 of the budget for this year, and that's of December 31st. Knowing that January typically, February typically are cooler months, and so higher electricity would be used. But we'll have an update at the next quarterly report review of the program through that time period. Any questions on that?
Yes.
Councillor Kaplan?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I tried to raise my hand, I couldn't find it. Yes, my question is, I appreciate this, Bryn. I see 12 have now reached the threshold. Have all 12 been offered and followed up for getting an audit, an energy audit or a water audit, so that they can possibly take some steps with the city assistance to lowering those bills in a sustainable way?
Upon application for the program, they are told of the requirement. They do have 2 years to get that audit completed. So we are allowing them time, and as well as our conservation division time, to for the customers to request those audits and those audits to be completed. So we are not immediately notifying customers. What I foresee happening is at the year mark, we would notify those customers, all customers that had qualified for the discount program, that the requirement exists, because they may have forgotten that they did agree to that as part of receiving the discount.
So just to follow up, do you know if any of those, I'm focused now on the 12 who have hit the $400 limit, who should have a higher incentive to try to find ways to reduce their consumption of electricity and water in a comfortable way? Have any of them had the audit yet, do you know?
We have not had a single customer provide documentation that they've had an audit of those 454.
Thank you.
So definitely a reminder will need to be sent.
Councilor Bloom?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Councilor Kaplan, for that question. Follow up on that. Obviously, this is the incentive. I'm curious, what is the stick here? So if they go 2 years, they don't actually do the audit, they don't qualify for the program going forward?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, continue.
Okay. Great, thank you. Now we'll have the update on the utility receivable, as was mentioned before. I put a couple slides together here to give you an idea, but I just want to talk about our process. We have an overall aging of our utility receivables, and what that means is we track each month and balance to each month by fund what the delinquency is. We do not consider an account delinquent until it's billed the next month. The first 1 to 30 days is a current account. We do, tell customers bills are due and payable upon receipt. However, they are not technically past due until they reach that 31-day mark or when their next bill comes out. So we also offer payment plans, and we are actually doing really well with having folks get on these payment plans, and then as soon as that next bill generates and they have not adhered to the payment plan, they are removed from the payment plan. So then they would go back into the bucket of being delinquent. So we kind of have 3 different buckets here that we like to talk about. We have our overall aging for the utilities, which is that roughly $5 million, 4.9 on the left-hand column. Then we have our delinquent portion. So that is truly what is outstanding, regardless if they're on a payment plan or not. Those that are on a payment plan and adhere to the payment plan are not subject to delinquent processing. Those that are not on a payment plan are. So right now, the city is continuing to actively pursue that 1.2 million almost that are not on payment plans, and they are subject to delinquent processing. So we will be bringing to council at the next meeting updates to our Ashland Municipal Code for our utility billing process. And this is hoping to streamline our process for delinquent processing. And it will also benefit the customer as well by not allowing them to become so far behind that they cannot, with an active payment plan, readily be able to get themselves caught back up. We want something that is reasonable for them. Because of COVID, because of the lack of staffing, unfortunately, we got to this predicament we're in now. But the utility billing staff is actively pursuing and helping customers as best they can and as quickly as they can to get those balances reduced. Our current software does not track the people that are on payment plans and how they are aged, meaning the 1 to 30 days, 30 to 60, and so forth. It doesn't track that or by fund. So I know in total, by customers, we have 1.2 that is outstanding. But like I said, we are actively pursuing that. As each quarter goes on and each quarterly report is presented to council and the commission, I will be updating you all on these numbers.
Mayor Graham?
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. That was the slide I was looking at. So out of that 1.2 million, am I correct in understanding that we don't really know how many of those people are 3 days past their due date versus 90?
Correct.
As we look at upgrading our system, is that one of those things that we are looking to correct for?
Yes, yes.
Because one of the things that's hard to know from this side is how much of that 1.2 is a problem and how much is it that, people just, there's a little bit of wash back and forth, and some number of people, by the end of the year, they're up to date. They drop in and out of that delinquency space, but they don't get to the point where they get shut off.
Right.
And it would be good to be able to, as we're looking at upgrading that system, to figure out how do we know how that is trending.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. The requests for proposals were just submitted. They are going through review now. So we do have hope that we will be reviewing and doing some demonstrations with those that submitted proposals, and that definitely is an aspect that we will be reviewing. Aging by fund is very important for the total receivable, but also for the delinquency side.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Dale?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brent, on that. And just to follow up on the mayor's comments relative to legal and updated ordinance and policies, maybe Johan, if you might be able to speak high-level preview of what legal is considering relative to UB policies and how we might be able to better track this to the mayor's point and what can be expected.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor. And I think Brent and I and Carmel have had a number of meetings on this, and what we've been essentially discussing is mirroring the ORS in the ordinance and then developing a policy at the same time as implementing this billing software that can be readily adapted to what's working and what's not working. The policy that'll come, or excuse me, the code, the change that'll come before you will essentially just mirror the ORS. It'll be, here are the standards that the law requires. Our policy as we develop it will be like, a notice will go out on day 15. Once a person is delinquent, we send them a delinquency notice and a shut-off date until they get on a payment plan. And like Brent was mentioning earlier, a lot of this will help prevent these insurmountable amount of back-due payments. I mean, it's one thing to fall $300 behind, $500 behind, but when you get $10,000 behind, even with the 6-month or 12-month payment plan, it's really hard to afford. So the idea is with this software and with this new policy, getting it out, getting the people aware, and getting them on board.
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, sorry. Councilor. Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Brent. Two quick questions. One, have we seen any of the money rolling in from the third party we hired to go after tax returns of people that were delinquent that were still in the area?
Not yet. It's too soon. We just entered that agreement. We've just coordinated with the collection agency, so it's just been a few months. So I would expect it to take a few months more before we start to see, and it could even be the taxes that are due, April 15th. It even could be in fiscal year 27 that we're seeing it.
Copy, thanks. And then the second question is from your previous slide, but just doing a little bit of quick math on the 454 people that we have now, I would expect to potentially see that number rise if we continue to have tough times or we hit recession. Do we have an idea of how much capacity that system has? Like if half of the community needed that 30% up to $400, and then where is that money coming from?
So that money is budgeted in those funds, the electric fund, wastewater, and water fund. And we're monitoring it closely because we really don't know if for some reason it did spike. We would have to reassess, and we talked about that when we developed this new assistance program. We'd have to reassess, is our income threshold correct? Are we budgeting enough to cover it? And really what the impact is. I will tell you that compared to the program that we had previously, that we had 2 different programs, we were closer to roughly 500 customers that would qualify year-round, or excuse me, each year for the programs, the year-round as well as the winter assistance. So we're at 454 right now.
Copy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just to clarify that answer, so this money is ratepayer money that is used for the discount programs?
Copy. Thank you. Maybe I can, Chair, may I? I've had a couple of people come up to me recently and say, hey, with this potential rate increase coming in front of you soon, is any of that money going to go to subsidize my neighbor that can't afford to pay their bill? And it sounds like the answer is yes.
Yeah, it would be built into the rates.
Okay, thank you.
This is the total aging by fund. This is kind of the end of the discussion here, showing the total and then the total that is delinquent by fund based upon the different time periods of the aging, if this is helpful, if there's any questions. So this again is back to the total delinquent, the total past due, not taking out those that are on a payment plan because we don't have that ability to do that right now. So right now, the electric fund, 1.16 in total is delinquent.
So in general, what do you expect to collect of the 2 million that's over 120 days?
Well, these are active accounts as well. So we actively pursuing them, getting them on payment plans. We've had huge success with the payment plans. So I do have great hope that we will collect most of it. It's just such a anomaly for the utility to have this high of a delinquency that it's hard to know. Before COVID times, our collection rate was very small that we would get back. But this is active accounts, customers that actively have accounts with us that we are working with to recoup these funds.
Thank you. Please continue.
Okay, so we're going to go into the forecasting update unless there's any other questions about the quarterly. So the forecast, as I mentioned before, was prepared for the council retreat December 1st. The process for developing the forecast, we gathered and analyzed historical averages, and we developed a set of assumptions. So it's essential to continue to evaluate revenues and expenditures and any streams that we hear of to update these forecasts periodically. So that's what's going to be presented here is an update to the previous forecast. So additional adjustments that were made from the December 1st forecast, we are maintaining in the best case scenario the $5 park fee. We have removed the park fee from the worst case scenario. We have reduced the interest earnings, as I mentioned before, with the fund balances decreasing, we will receive less in interest. We received our PERS estimate rates. They're not firm rates, but they are the estimates that they have sent to us, and they were just slightly different. They were less than 1% different, so not a large difference. The additional piece is the property tax revenue has reduced slightly. Right now, we have 2 different appeals that are taking place with our property taxes, one by Charter Communications, and that appeal right now has the county holding $120,000 of our property tax. The appeal window is still open. So they can continue to appeal, and when for the risk, the county will withhold that property tax. Even though we are seeing 103.6% of our revenue coming in, we do still have to keep that into consideration, that we may not receive the prior property tax as we had anticipated. So we've reduced that as well. So again, these are the assumptions used. This was in the packet, just slightly changed. Most is the interest, bringing interest earnings down, recognizing that, as well as PERS slightly changing. So this is the, sorry, I thought you had a question. So this is in your packet. This is the best case scenario in your packet. And what this is I'll just speak to it, us not meeting our policy requirement by fiscal year 31 with the assumptions used. The change from the prior one is only $55,000. So it is very close in line with the prior forecast. The one that differs tremendously is the worst case scenario, and that is because of the reduction of the park fee and the reduce of the interest earnings. So that one has us not meeting our policy next fiscal year 27. And then 28 is when then we really see that we need to make some decisions. Any questions?
Please continue.
That's all I have.
That's all you have.
That's all I have.
Last chance.
Here.
Counselor Kaplan, you
Here
out
I
there? Okay.
Yes, I did. I raised my hand.
I see it
Brandon,
now.
could you go back? Brandon, could you go back a couple of slides to the one that shows the best and worst case scenarios? There's a 0%. There's a 0% under capital and a 5%. Next one. Yes, the last line is capital. Actually, I can't see it on my screen. Wait. It's 0% under best scenario, and I think it's 5% under worst. Could you explain what that means?
It truly means just leaving capital at, for the best, status quo. 5%, we do not have funding for our capital right now. So that is worst case scenario. We still do not have funding for our capital, and it is eating into our ending fund balance and making us out of policy. So that is just an assumption if it were to increase 5% without a source of revenue.
So could you explain, so you answered Councilor Dale earlier in the meeting, saying that by the end of the fiscal year, we'd have something before us talking about a policy of reserving general fund for operating expenses only, not for capital. Could you talk a little bit about how that might change the scenario planning?
Right, it definitely would change the scenario if we have a capital improvement fund now. If we structure that policy to truly be our capital and we no longer incur the costs out of the general fund, it absolutely will change this scenario.
And what's the magnitude of that with 5%? Hard for me to visualize what that is. It's percentage rather than dollars.
Sure. So right now there isn't that much, but it's a worst case scenario. If for some reason we had a catastrophic something happen where we had to find some capital funds in the general fund. Right now we have minimal just maintenance funds that are in the general fund that we would need to consider if we remove those, move them to the capital improvement fund, or leave the maintenance capital in the general fund.
I guess the question I'm trying to get a handle on is this 5%, does this move the needle $100,000, $500,000, and $1 million? What does it mean?
Let's look here. On the worst case scenario, it is $545,000 each year.
Okay, so they're already in 2027 and then 2028 and beyond.
2027, we have at even higher, we actually have 985,000. We do have it drop, but then stay consistent. Right now,
you. Go ahead,
you're welcome.
sorry.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That's fine.
So I think the thing to keep in mind with the capital is that we don't have any money for anything, for any of our buildings. So roof caves in at City Hall. We have no money, right? So this is, we're taking money out of the general fund because we don't have a capital fund for general fund buildings and have to apply that towards an emergency fix because we don't have a rainy day supply of capital money for things like that. So that's where that scenario comes into play.
Councillor Dale?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Bryn. Yeah, and to City Manager's point, so to interpolate between best and worst puts us squarely in the middle of 27, 29, which we're coming up to very soon. And to add literal insult to injury relative to this, we have basically a negligible reserve fund. So I would assume that we would want to start having these discussions extremely soon, like prior to or right kind of at summer. Would that be a reasonable timeline to get out in front of this?
Yeah, so on the look ahead, you'll see some tentatively planned kind of fiscal discussions coming out of that December retreat where we'll start kind of bringing some scenarios forward for consideration.
Okay, I think that's the end of the questions. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is public forum. We have 3 folks asking to speak tonight. I'll call you up shortly. You'll have 3 minutes each, and please identify yourself, first and last name, and which city you reside in. We don't need your street address. 3 people are in this order: Paul Mozina, Corey Frank, and Gail Patton. You're welcome to go ahead and line up on the wall there to keep things moving. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Paul Mozina, and I wanted to speak about the glyphosate issue. I have 17 years of experience using glyphosate back in Wisconsin. I worked for the DNR. I was a volunteer. And I mixed and sprayed many hundreds of gallons of glyphosate and other herbicides. And I did that for 17 years, like once or twice a week. And I did end up getting throat cancer in 2012. And it could have been, I had other risk factors, alcohol and tobacco and other things that may have contributed to the risk. But I just wanted to share that as a personal antidote as you're considering the use of glyphosate on the city property, that you carefully make sure that everyone has following safety precautions. I may have not followed them as judiciously as I should have. And I did have a very serious outcome from that. So I hope that, I would like to see a schedule of all the places and what herbicide is going to be sprayed anywhere in the city so that we can see how much is being sprayed. And I hope that you'll consider making sure that all the park workers who are spraying this are very well protected and mixing. Anyways, I'm happy to be alive, but I was in bad shape, and glyphosate contact may have contributed to that. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Hi, my name is Corey Frank, and I live here in Ashland. And what I really want to say, first of all, is thank you, because you dedicate your time, and you're not compensated except for the employees of the city. But I do thank you. I may not agree with you many times, but I do respect you. Now, having said that, November 9th, 2022, there was a ballot measure, 15210, that was defeated by our Ashland City residents, which by 65%, which would have changed the leadership of our parks, elected parks commissioners. And I know we're talking about changes now, and I think taking away some of their responsibilities, and I don't want to see that happen. I'd like to see our residents vote on things. I'd like to see transparency, and clarity. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gail Patton, and I live in Ashland, and this pertains to the Park Department. I have one comment and one question. First off, with the new, I guess, administration coming with the Parks Department, I hope you will revisit some of the decisions that have been made recently, including removing quite a few garbage cans around and through Lithia Park, as well as around the greenway near the dirt bike jumps, I guess they're called now, and the bottom of the dog park. I walk in those areas every day, not each place every day, but since the garbage cans have been removed, there's a lot more trash around. People were using the garbage cans. I understand part of the decision was because people were putting their regular trash in there, but they were being used for, by lots of people. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is I understand there was up to $50,000 allocated, I guess, for new signage for the parks, for Lithia Parks and other places. And I don't know if signs were actually made. There are no new signs up that I know of. Was the money spent? Were the signs made? And if so, where are they? If somebody could answer that.
Thank you. We don't have a back and forth conversation, so we can't
Okay.
answer it in this session.
At some point.
However, you certainly can contact staff and ask that question.
Okay.
On to item 5, which is the City of Ashland 5-year strategic plan process. Mayor and I are on for this one. I'm going to ask her to start. It's largely a council mayor operation, although Parks is involved.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Chair. So we have just kicked off the beginning of a strategic planning process that has been several years in the making. I remember right at the beginning of February, or in February of 2020, we were about to start a strategic planning process, and it has been set aside for a number of years while other things were happening. So it's great to get back to this. What this strategic planning process does is set both a vision and chart a course for the community at a much larger scale than just the city. But what we're looking at it for at the city level is what are those pieces that are specific to the city operation? Where are those pieces of this larger vision and strategy that are really the city's to carry? And making sure that we build our structures and our services to meet the needs of that vision. Sabrina, would you like to talk a little bit more about just the structure of it and how people will be able to participate?
Sure. So we've partnered with SSW Consulting to help us with this. So on January 28th, we had our workshop with City Council. Chair Bachman was there, and then some staff. And so really kind of setting the ground rules for the process. So next in the step, we will be back in March with an engagement plan for council to review and improve. Prior to that, though, I'll be reaching out to both council and the Parks Commission to ensure that we are capturing all the groups that we should be contacting with that engagement. So you should look for that list, and that would be helpful for us to make sure that we're getting a good breadth of feedback from throughout the community when we do that engagement. The goal is to have a finalized plan by July, August, and I'm a baseless optimist, so I'm sure we can do it, because this will help us as we move forward with our budgeting to know the community's priorities as well as council for how we should fund city services moving forward.
And that engagement plan will also include just general public, general constituents, opportunities for them to provide feedback. And there will be multiple points where the consultants come and check in with us, let us know what they've come to this far, where they're seeing the consensus in the community, so that we can be looking at that from the council standpoint and also from the Parks Commission standpoint, so that we get down the road and what comes out of the end of this is a vision that the people of this community can see themselves in.
Thank you. I just want to clear up a potential bit of confusion here. The Parks Department and the commission have been working on a separate 10-year strategic plan. It's more operational than the vision level plan that Mayor just talked about. They're two separate things. We have a lot of data that pertains specifically to parks from our outreach that may be useful for the larger strategic plan. The thing to remember is, as a department, our 10-year strategizing is about parks, recreation, and senior services, and we'll be sure to be working in parallel so that the two plans mesh. I'll be as involved as I can. My initial comment when I turned it over to the mayor was more directed to the point that the plan that she was speaking to will be adopted by the council, not by the commission. We'll have our own adopted plan separately from that. Okay? Okay. That takes us to number 6, which is Parks Leadership Next Steps, and Carmel Zoran, our assistant city attorney, will be leading us on that one. And she has a partner, Deputy City Manager Jordan Rock.
All right. Good evening, City Council and Parks Commission tonight. Thank you for letting us join you here today. With the resignation of Director Rocky Houston, we thought this was a really great time just to talk together as a body to review kind of the history of the Parks Department and its integration with the larger city, and to kind of reflect on some challenges that we have noticed this past year as staff. As ways that we can start thinking about as a group, maybe some structural changes for the operations to improve moving forward. So that's the goal tonight, is to kind of level set with everyone so we have a shared history, identify some of the issues, and then we can start discussing if we want to set a path for addressing any of those issues before the Parks Commission takes their next steps. And so that I will... Are you doing your slides into it? Oh, next one? Okay. Thank you. So always want to couch ourselves on what is it that we really focus on for our parks, and that is to provide and promote recreational opportunities and to preserve and maintain public lands. This is the mission of the Park Commission that is carried out by the Parks Department. And a reminder, this is all via our city charter. There are 3 sections of the city charter that really speak to the Park Commission role. And that's going to be controlling and managing all our park lands, administering our open space program, and acting as our recreation commission. So this is the history part, and I will say this is from a lot of research I did looking through past historical documents, in particular the city audits and our financial reports. So as other folks have things that they want to fill in gaps, please speak up and share. It's definitely a joint group project mapping out all of our history. As folks know, Ashland established our park system officially in 1908 when the voters voted to create a park commission to tax themselves and to set aside land, which is what is known today as Lithia Park. That was back in 1908. And that is really how our park system functioned, with their own revenue stream, their own oversight body, and dedicated park lands. Until a really big major change happened in the 90s, and that was Measure 5 and Measure 50. And the biggest change in the 90s is said the parks can no longer issue their own taxes. Those taxes have to go through the city. And that is when we have set up our property tax system we have today. Around that same time period, the city of Ashland, the voters voted for the first youth activities levy, which was additional property tax funding specifically for our parks. And then here on the chart, you can see that lasts until 2008, when that operating levy actually switched over to our school district. And so our voters have continued to support that, but those property taxes now go to our schools through the youth activities and academics levy. And that was due to a legal decision that happened in the state elsewhere. It was more appropriate for that to be an education tax rather than a government tax. And then another major change happened in 2013, and that is how we changed the approach of how we labeled the funding of our Parks Department within the city. So between the 90s, when Measure 5 and Measure 50 passed, and 2013, the Parks was receiving a set millage amount every single year from city property taxes. That was $2.09 per $1,000 of assessed value. In 2013, that methodology changed, and the city and parks switched to a charge for service model, meaning that the city, used property taxes to provide funding to the Parks Department, but rather than at a set millage rate, that was on an agreed and discussed upon amount every budget. And then in 2024, we had another major change. And that major change when our auditors said, hey, we can no longer have a parks fund that is separate from the regular general fund. So in 2024, that is when you see the parks fund and the general fund come together. And now all that funding is just within the general fund. And then the most recent major change is in 2025, City Council with Parks Commission support passed an ordinance that officially made the Parks Department a department of the city, so that both the Parks Commission and the City Council were part of the same organization, and helped set some definitions and parameters around that we'll go into. So those are the white and the yellow sections on this graph. And what I'm overlaying it with I want you guys to take a look at is the blue is kind of the revenue that went specifically to parks up until the general fund combined with the park fund, as well as the expenses over time. And then what I want you to see in that first early part of the graph is the youth activities levy funding added a ton of funding to our parks, specifically for our parks. That was in 2025 dollars, about $3.5 to $4 million a year in extra funding. When that went away in 2008, the Parks Department adjusted their expenses down. We cut, I think at that point, a lot of recreation programs. And we have stayed consistent with funding ever since. It looks like there's a big drop in 2024, 2025, and that's just because that is appropriation of the general fund. It was no longer park-specific money, but now city general money. So this next slide, I think, tells a more accurate picture of funding for our parks over time, if you don't mind going forward. So what this chart is showing over that same timeline is what proportion of general revenue, so these are the general fund monies that consistently come in every year, our property taxes, our franchise fees, our electric utility user tax, and the other fees that are on your utility bill that are not specific to any of our enterprise funds, how much of that goes to parks? And it has averaged, back from the early 2000s, roughly 30% a year really consistently. So even while we have changed our funding methodologies for our park system, our funding has stayed consistent compared to the overall revenues of the city. The caveat being, once again, it's the youth activities levy that ended in 2008, whereas we took the major loss to our park system's funding. So over the same time period, we saw a decrease in the number of employees working within our parks department. That is largely the way that we have most commonly used to help control expenses in our parks and maintain within the level of funding that we have had over the years. Our number of parks has stayed relatively the same. Where we have had a ton of growth is through our trail miles and our open space. I didn't put open space on this graph because it made it really out of whack because of scale, but it pretty much parallels those trail miles, which makes sense. A lot of the open space we purchase is to complete our trail system. And so any questions I'd love to answer just about the structure or kind of some tangibles around the Parks Department over time and the relationship within the larger city government. Okay, beautiful. Oh, Justin.
Commissioner Adams.
If, going back to the previous slide, if we replace percentages with dollars, would the chart track?
If you, When you say track, you mean stay consistently over time?
Would we see the same pattern if we use dollars instead of percents?
If we use $25, you would see the revenue or the money given over to parks would have a slightly more incline because our revenues have slightly inclined over time. Granted, that has leveled out. We've seen expenses now outpacing. So if you go back a slide, here that middle blue line is kind of the equivalent of what you would see percentage-wise over that same time period. So what we're seeing is revenues are remaining, expenses are going up. We've been controlling expenses by reducing staff. Yeah. The story as old as time right there. Yeah.
Anyone else? And I'm talking to Councilor Kaplan out there. Okay.
Perfect.
Please continue.
No, thank you.
So I just want to spend the next 2 slides just sharing my reflections around the major change that happened this past year, which was the switching to the Parks Department as an official city department, and kind of some observations of where I'm seeing pinch points that I would love to help address prior to the selection of a new Parks Director. So Ordinance 3428, this is what officially put Parks Department as a department within the city. I think for a long time, the Parks Department was functioning as a department in that we had an MOU where we still provided HR, we provided legal, we provided finance, et cetera. But this ordinance really solidified the different roles and responsibilities of the staff of the Parks Department. Some really specific changes that have become very clear is that employee oversight. The Parks Director is responsible just for supervision of employees. And it is the city manager that negotiates labor contracts, implements those labor contracts, and does final approval of hiring and firing. Another major change is the budgeting and spending. Now that it is a subset of the general fund and an official department of the city, that budget is fully proposed, managed, and performed under the direction of the city manager, and is really subject to city council approval. And then the reporting structure, this is something that, remained the same but has become stronger due to the city manager's role in the city council side of things, is the Parks Director reports really both to the Parks Commission as well as to the city manager. To the Commission for the policy and strategic direction of the Parks Department, and the city manager for all employee-related things and fiscal things. Yeah. So this has kind of been the first year of implementing under that ordinance model, under that department model. Where I see the biggest challenges is that potentially the Parks Director may be the toughest job in the city. And one of the reasons for being the toughest job is that you got to make sure that you have an alignment between the Park Commission, between the city manager and the city council to really have strong success in your role. And when either of those are out of whack or out of kink, it can take much longer to get things done or get things done to the way that everyone would like to see them done. An example of that is just the amount of time it took us to set the rental costs for Pioneer Hall and Community Center as we were working to get all the different groups aligned with what those numbers should be. Another major operational challenge, which I think is a holdover from the way Parks Department was seen as a totally separate entity in the past to what it is today, which is a fully incorporated department, is our capital projects. Our Parks Department is the only department that's in charge of their own capital projects from soup to nuts, whereas in the rest of the city, it's our Public Works Department oversees those capital projects. And so things I look at like East Main Park, it was park staff that were having to build that RFP, put out the notices, et cetera, where we have very experienced public works staff that could support that or have economies of scale or comparative advantage. Another example is Windburn Way paving. We have a pavement management plan in the city. We don't include Windburn Way or the parking lot on that one because historically that is fully Parks jurisdiction. So that's an area where we need to work on operationally helping integrate with other city operations. Another operational challenge is just communication with the public. Traditionally, we've had 2 separate communication arms within our parks and within our city. So making sure our communications are in alignment were very difficult this past year. And then lastly, the Parks Director is a very unique role. Most cities have a parks department rather than a separate park special district. And so in our recruitment pools, we tend to attract really qualified folks for parks operations. They oversee parks operations, but maybe don't have the experience reporting to a board or holding more of that political element. So when we go out to hire a parks director, I think it'd be great to really work on what specific values and skill sets are we looking for, knowing that our role is a unique role compared to other parks director roles out there. So these are all areas that, from an operational side, I would really like to help support and work on some different model changes so that the person can be successful in their role once here.
All right, can everyone hear me? Here, I just kind of wanted to plug this in as a kind of a reminder for where our department fits in. This is our ethical rule, where an attorney can factor in other considerations and guidance to our client. And as this rule points out, moral, economic, social, political factors that might be relevant to the client's situation. And in the legal department, we have one client, and that is the city of Ashland. And so before I go too far into my presentation, I just want to acknowledge all of the public service that everyone here is taking on. And it's precisely because I know how important the city of Ashland is to all of you and the importance of parks as a vital service to our community, that I think it's really important to have these frank, open, respectful conversations, because sometimes what worked in the past isn't necessarily always the best path forward, and we have an opportunity to come together and talk about what is that best path forward. And with that, sometimes it's another part of our role to give frank advice, and sometimes hear some things that can be difficult to digest, but we will get through it together. With that, and it's kind of dovetailing a little bit on Jordan's observations, I kind of noticed 3 areas that I think we can have room for improvement. Capital projects, human resource personnel, although I actually have to say, when I get to that part, we've made significant strides. So I actually, that one I kind of do with a heavy caveat, actually almost to acknowledge that there have been really good improvements in that sense. And then governmental confusion, and I think that one is probably one I'm going to spend a little bit more time on. Capital projects, kind of 2 broad ways I have sort of noticed issues coming out is as kind of the 2 highlights. I'll start with the first one, expertise mismatch. Typically, park staff specialize in landscape, recreation, and operations having to do with those 2 matters, whereas Public Works is really the department that has the expertise in technical permitting, working with our community development, and they kind of have the capacity to efficiently deal with big projects. It kind of dovetails with that expertise mismatch, sort of dovetails with the citywide coordination, that having that centralized program also provides an opportunity for economies of scale. The city does benefit when we have a top-down structure. Everyone's getting the same procurement, everyone's getting the same bonding, everyone's getting the same insurance, and it's an efficient system. We're treating everyone equally if it's kind of like housed in one spot. So what do some of the potential consequences look like for missteps? And this is something that are risks with any capital project. But again, when there's kind of a division, it sort of creates a little more tension that, that there could be more missteps. Mismanagement of bids, if increased potential for procurement protests, which could implicate fines or reputational damage to the city, failure to properly ensure bonding or insurance. Concern would be lack of familiarity might create a potential that we don't actually get that in. It hasn't happened, and I don't, we have good staff that is ready to make sure that that is in, but the consequence if we didn't is that the city would take on liabilities for a contractor that worst case scenario was judgment proof, insolvent, stretched too thin. And then potential for maybe some more cost overruns or project delays. Again, natural risk to any project, but the division and more steps to go through could lead to more cost overruns or project delays. Some recent examples, we had to go out for a rebid for East Main. We kind of had some issues with our frontage application, having to do with the annexation and the lack of familiarity with community development and what we needed to have in line for our land use. Ice rink, lack of permitting, engineering knowledge at the director level, lack of capacity to oversee multiple projects was a challenge. And, Windburn Way, there's kind of a part of me, I'm like, well, Windburn Way, it's in Lithia Park, but it's a public right-of-way. Is that parks? Is it just city? And this is kind of the challenge, I think, like when that example is sort of a challenge that, we have to work through. Human resource, like I said, actually, I think we've made really good strides in this. So huge kudos to our HR department. But the potential, if there is division, is that we're not treating employees in the same way. We want complaints to get handled the same way. We want equity in the same way. We want people paid in the same way.
Mayor Graham.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but it strikes me that this is one of the primary things we handled with the ordinance last year. And so I wonder why we're having the conversation here.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I'll kind of go through this quickly. Briefly, areas for concerns in that division: inconsistent policies, improper management of the parks director. For that second point, some of the awkwardness is that in some ways, in a lot of ways, it would make sense if the parks director was managed in the same way that any director is, but the bifurcation makes the director kind of one more step removed from supervision within broader city functions. And so for a lot of department heads managed by the city manager, who has the perspective, a citywide perspective, there is a little bit of distance in the same way that the city manager doesn't have that same supervision over the parks director as other department heads. It has occasionally come up the commission has an advocacy role to focus on parks, and there's been a dynamic there where instances of overstepping that policy role. Some of the consequence for that is an impact for employee well-being and a little confusion on proper direction. So if an employee is sitting there and thinking, well, I have this is kind of strong, I'm being told to act this way, contrary to potentially their professional judgment or otherwise. Governmental confusion. The city of Ashland is one governmental entity, yet it has a hybrid model regarding just parks and recreation. We have elected Parks Board, sets policy for parks, while the city controls virtually every aspect of implementation, from finance, legal, city policies, and at worst, it could create a dynamic of sort of perception of blurred accountability, perhaps especially if residents aren't quite sure, is this a parks thing? Is this a city thing? Who's responsible? Who do I direct my complaint to? This is kind of a heavy slide, but here are kind of the three ways I see that coming out, and it is sort of difficult to put your finger on it, sort of as the Winburn way demonstrates. Voters hold parks responsible for park outcomes, but then city council controls every stage of that implementation. Parks director reports to the commission, which lacks that same supervision, like fiscal awareness that a city manager has. So even though a city manager could actually be in a really good position to provide good supervisory feedback, historically, city managers are very hesitant to step into park lane because it's park lane. And so it puts city managers kind of in an awkward position where they don't want to kind of step on toes. And like I said, I know some of this stuff is a little uncomfortable to hear, but what we don't, a fallout that could happen is sort of a feeling of ineffective decision making. And we want to put you in the position where the elected bodies can act in a spot of confidence. And that's kind of, again, our goal for coming together. Budgetary and communication mismatch occasionally. Since the majority of the Parks Fund comes from the general fund, which is set by council. Excuse me, that's but then, should have deleted that second 2A. But meanwhile, so council Parks, council is in charge of the general fund. Parks relies on the general fund. But then the council doesn't have the policy input for what Parks does, like the same control. And so there's kind of a mismatch, there could be a mismatch for council members where you're like, well, I don't like the policy position that you're taking. I don't have that same buy-in. I control the budget. It creates this
If I could interrupt this
uncomfortableness.
time, a lot of hypotheticals here. I think we need to move through this quickly. I have some thoughts about your recommendations, and I think we can pull it together at that point.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here are some examples. Pioneer Hall. Parks had a instruction to you know, especially with the budget issues that we're facing, get your budget in line. Parks proposed some fees that were at recovery, and then when it got to council reversed it. That was kind of an awkward moment. Pros plan, strategic plan, they kind of are working side by side. Would that have been something that had been good to do together, a little bit more coordinated? And then some of the complaints with the ice rink. A lot of citizens were complaining to council members and city manager, even though it was Park Lane. So those are kind of some examples for how it's played out. Again, the mission goal and the goal for me in bringing up some potentially uncomfortable conversations is, like I said, to really talk through a better path forward. Here's also an example. When I went through the agenda for this is pretty kind of broad speaking, but some of the examples, looking at the study session and agenda items for the last 12 months, here are some kind of the bigger ticket items for what was on Parks Commission agendas. Which comes to our recommendation to take the time to assess some of these operational and structural changes, and come back, work with management, come back to both bodies with a more concrete example of how everyone can work together. In the interim, hold Park Commission meetings alongside City Council so that each one is receiving the same public input and receiving the same information. Staff has only one spot to report to. And then in the meantime, hold the director position vacant while the city can work through a better plan.
Okay, a couple comments. One is, the first recommendation, I'm looking at this one where you said delay hiring of Parks Director, necessary changes. We take that under advisement. We, the commission, and I'm not speaking for the entire commission, but I do chair it, the Parks Commission retains the authority to hire, evaluate, and terminate as necessary the director. That's in the excuse me, the ordinance that established the department. So we take that under advisement. That's our call, and I'm sensitive to everything you're saying. There certainly are myriad of operational issues that we're still sorting out since we created the ordinance, and I think we need to continue talking about it. Not tonight. I think this needs to be digested, and I would recommend we put it on possibly a follow-up on the July joint session. I will say that the commission will be addressing next steps on what to do about the director position, and we'll certainly invite you folks to participate in that so that we are working toward the same goal. So that's the first recommendation. Now I have a second recommendation, and that you're showing up here as hold Park Commission meetings alongside City Council, and I just don't understand that. I mean, I don't know how we could implement that on a practical level. I get the reason, but I'm not sure what you meant.
Yeah, I think we can really take a good look at the agendas that Parks has, and I think we can fit it in when there is a topic. I really feel like it's actually topics that the council should hear too, and that we can fit it in on a quarterly basis, maybe so not meet as regularly, and fit it in with a council agenda. That's my proposal.
Well, certainly on a quarterly basis, we do intend to meet, but we don't take action because it's a study session. So it's an unusual idea, and it just needs to be fleshed out. I think I'll just leave it there. And that's all I have to say to introduce the question session here. So I would like people to concentrate on questions to the presenters about process of how they came to these recommendations, ask them any detailed questions about that. We're not going to have a conversation amongst the elected group here. It's strictly clarifying the recommendations. Okay, I'm going to start with Councilor Bloom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Carmel. That was really good, and I appreciate you framing it as uncomfortable conversations, and I can tell it's uncomfortable for some. That said, to this idea of the meetings alongside City Council, I agree with Chair Bachman. I mean, I appreciate the intent, but I'm imagining we can barely get through our meetings as it is, and now you have 12 people that want to ask questions, which is great because then they're getting information they wouldn't typically get, but then they're also not making decisions. So now we're just spending a bunch of time, not for no reason, but no real outcome comes from that. So I'm just curious about the structure that you're envisioning because, like I said, I mean, we might as well keep our meetings till 3 o'clock in the morning if we're going to have 12 people up here.
I mean, I think that recommendation really comes with a serious look at the parks agendas. Like the most serious parks agenda items, when I go back, prioritize if there are parks agenda questions that will ultimately involve the city council to hear. To me, there's kind of a part of me like why wouldn't you want to hear it all at the same time? So, for example, looking at this, Pioneer Hall, like maybe that actually could have been an example where the council did hear, or East Main. That ultimately took coordination with the council. It took coordination with city management. We worked on the budget and the funding, and so that was actually an example where I thought everyone would have benefited from listening to the same thing. So I think that was really kind of where my head was going with that, and also that maybe there is ultimately a benefit to really look at the agenda items and prioritize if it's something that both parties meet. But yeah, if it's a Bandersnatch trail, like, does the council need to hear that? No. But if it's something that involves the council hearing, I think there could be very much a benefit to that.
So just to understand, so again, I guess, let's take the Windburn Way, right? It's just an example that there's a decision to be made about Windburn Way, but it is a public right-of-way. The city is essentially funding this. Is it going through streets? This is where there's a contention point between the two bodies. That would be an example where a meeting would be held alongside each other. So it's not necessarily regularly scheduled meetings. It's that if there's a special circumstance that requires us to schedule a meeting together, that would be the case.
Yeah, because I think the Parks Commission also fields a lot of information, and really valuable information kind of is listed right there. And so, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Adams?
City of Ashland is unique. Oh, sorry. I hit the button to turn it off. City of Ashland is unique in many wonderful ways. In some ways that people in other cities might say is weird. One of the ways in which we are unique is that we have two separate independently elected governing bodies. We have City Council and we have the Parks Commission, which I volunteer my time for. It's in our charter. It was supported by the voters last year. And it's one of the weird and wonderful things about our town. We also have an ordinance that Chair Bachman and the mayor, with some support from me and former Councilor Hyatt, came up with to try to smooth out some of the rough edges between in this unusual situation. There was a lot of deliberate effort put in, probably least by me on that list. And so I guess it's both a concern and I think I'll phrase it as a question. I'm wondering how the proposal tonight is consistent with city charter, with the will of the voters as expressed at the last election, and with the ordinance that our two bodies voted on together. I saw some reference to the ordinance that interestingly chooses slightly different language, and the language was chosen very specifically. I'm also concerned a little bit, and without wanting to go into personnel matters that we are not supposed to go into here, that there were deficiencies in individuals that are getting assigned to a whole department that I'm also concerned about in the presentation. So my question, again, to rephrase it, is how are these recommendations consistent with charter, with the ordinance, and with the expressed will of the voters of Ashland?
Well, I mean, I don't think that there would be anything, I don't think more coordination changes the commission's input for policy. Like, if the commission wanted to rework Lithia Park, have a different trail system, I don't see how that changes it. And similarly, I guess I'm not sure how both bodies processing the same information in a consistent manner changes that either.
If I may,
Adams?
Chair.
Oh.
I think just to spin off what Carmel said there, what she said at the beginning, I think is kind of getting overlooked here. In the same way that we have one client as the Office of the City Attorney, there's just one city. There's not two bodies here. The left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing. It's the most logical way for this to work effectively. If you look, and similarly, we're not just talking about a nebulous thing like parks. This is a parks department, which is a city department. It has to function with unified leadership. And if you look at 2.28600, it talks about the Parks Department, and it has the left and the right hand in there. It has the Parks Commission will look at policy for the Parks Department, which will be carried out with the city manager's direction. The operations side is the council through the city manager. The policy side is through the Parks Commission. You guys have to be working together because it also, as Carmel pointed out, and as Jordan pointed out, the risks and the exposures to our client, to the city, are the same. That's where we have to come in and say, hey, you guys have to have the same plan. You have to be working on the same page so people, if there is an issue, know where to go. This is not a question that went to the voters because, believe it or not, when this goes to the ballot, we all want to support it, but you can't think through every scenario. And the fact that the parks used to operate in a different funding system is no longer the case. For so many reasons, the left hand and the right hand need to be communicating. And in my mind, when I look at and I see the word policy, I think of as this is someone who's bringing forth advice as to what direction parks needs to go. The management of these lands, we have this idea to move forward. And then the operations side, the people who have boots on ground every day, they step in and they say, how does this function in reality? Because sometimes an idea is great, but it needs to be hammered through, like we see with, you might not know every step of the way how to do a capital project. I wouldn't expect a parks director to know that. But who does know that is a city manager, a public works director, and you have to be working together. The public works director certainly does not report to the commission. And so that is an issue that obviously didn't go before the voters. I support 100% there being a parks commission and then developing policy, but I have to advise my client as to the serious risk it creates when these arms aren't working together. That's our duty. So that's, I think, just to kind of really put it all on the table there.
Thank you. I'll come back. The only thing I'm hearing is that we need to communicate and work together.
Chair Buckland, can I answer that one on the operational side? I think where the recommendations from Aaron is coming from is we're asking for time, particularly where city management can work with our deputy director and our park superintendent to come up with some operational changes to be more successful. Right now, the left hand and the right hand, I think due to cultural past historical practices, are still very disjointed. And I would highly recommend having some changes that would have to be reviewed by both council and the commission, because they would change allocations and budgets, in order for the success of projects for our community.
Thank you. Mayor Graham, I have several other people who want to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple things. I think it's important for us to keep the two recommendations very separate, because one of them has nothing to do with the council. It is a recommendation specifically to the Parks Commission. That is not our lane, and that needs to be set aside for the Parks Commission to take up with the city staff to figure out what that looks like. The second question around holding the meetings alongside City Council is following up behind Councilor Bloom's comments. I don't structurally see how that works. I could imagine we're all here tonight, and what happens if it's time for the Parks Commission to make a decision and someone has to make a motion, but we're not all voting, and then we sit here and we wait for how does that actually work? I don't see it functionally working. But my question to you is, we just put this ordinance in place that created this. It created this coming together of the two bodies. We've only done it a couple of times. We're just kind of getting our feet under us. So given that what I've heard from you is primarily that there is information that both bodies needs to hear, is there a reason why that can't be done through the structure that we're sitting in right now? If we are thoughtful about what are those issues that are coming up that have that overlap between the two bodies, is there a reason that can't be done here with both bodies continuing to meet separately to handle the items that are specifically theirs to handle?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think the other thing, I think a bigger structural operational question is housing. What makes the most sense in fulfilling the mission of the Parks Commission? Where do we put? My suggestion is to really think about putting capital projects in with Public Works. So that could be a discussion.
If I could follow up.
Thank you. Mayor Graham, and then
Just a quick follow-up.
Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up to that. So I think that's the question that you're asking for some additional time. And I would anticipate as a council that if the commission decides that path is a good path to take to have these deeper operational questions, which I think there's certainly clearly indication that there is more work to be done on the operational side of things. Should the commission decide to go down that path, then I think the council would be ready to receive whatever of those conversations are coming out of there and to participate in them through this venue, as they come forward and as we sort of figure out what are the ones that need to be worked through in whatever way. So in my mind, I think there is maybe a pathway for all of those elements to come together, even though some of the questions are specific to one of the bodies.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams, you would want to follow up? No? Okay. Councilor Duquesne.
Thank you. So I wanted to kind of follow up on that too, the joint meetings. I don't know how that would happen either, because we can barely get through what's in front of us. However, I do understand the importance of all of us being together. And so I do appreciate that. And I looked at governmental confusion, that example, and then how you said parks have some important things that we should all discuss together, and I agree with that. However, I do believe so that not only the council can be abreast of things that are happening with the commission, but also our constituents. Per the charter, we are supposed to get a report from the parks on a monthly basis. So if we, as the council and as part of the council packet, were to receive that report, I think the governmental confusion could stop. We would have known about the ice rink. We would have known not only the council and our constituents, but I think would also help the commission itself. And it would bring us all together, and the left hand would know what the right hand is doing. And we can all be on the same page. I think having that monthly report would go a long way, and I think having scheduled joint meetings would be better so that we can all be here and we have a commissioner gone and a counselor gone, but having them scheduled I think would be really effective. So I would hope that we can see a monthly report and so that we could all be on the same page per the charter. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not aware of the charter requirement, but fine, we should, would you get that to us, please? And then certainly, we will figure out a way to do the best communication we can. Councillor Hanson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, friends. I appreciate the hard work that went into this, and I am embellishing my own spirit into this. I really like the spirit of us coming together and working better together. From your legal seat, what is the recommendation for coming together and making changes where appropriate? So I'm just curious, like, what's the ordinance side of things? What's the charter side of things? What's the commission's, where can the commission come with their work, and where does council help or fit in? Surely there's thoughts about like timelines and proposals to that isn't in here that I'm curious, like, you know, what other recommendations would you bring forward for, you know, some structure to getting to where I love that we have two elected bodies. I think it's incredibly special and weird. And I appreciate that staff has to deal with all of this as well as the public, but I think we have a better product because of it. So I can also see operational efficiencies. I can see like not adding workload to the two bodies by coming together, but better communication and separation where it makes sense. So how would you prescribe that we do this, and legally, like, where's the places we can step in and where are the places we should avoid?
I think my biggest interest is really having capital projects be housed in Public Works. That is probably my number one. And then I think we can certainly work. And then I think that to answer your other question is this was sort of step one, and then we'll come back with some follow-up to also address your question for specifics, Councilor DeCane's question for specifics on communication.
Okay.
That was sort of our staff opinion, unless you have other thoughts.
Let me just,
May
go
I
ahead.
finish, Chair? And Jordan, in your timeline, I saw you grab the mic. Sorry if I interrupted. But in your timeline, as the evolution has brought us to where we are, we haven't cleaned up the charter. We haven't, I don't know what our ordinances are, but, you know, we're still talking about millage that doesn't exist. So, you know, really also the second part of that question is like, when are we going to workshop these changes, and, you know, whose lane are they in? So that's also for legal, but if you're also to contribute anything, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jordan, so.
Just a couple comments from the chair and presiding officer. One is that we need to stay pretty much with the agenda, so we can't get too far off into talking about discussing how we're going to change the charter.
Totally, I was just curious.
I mean, update the entire charter. I get it, but I just want to stay focused.
Yeah.
I wanted to pass along a couple of, I think, wonderful developments. The mayor, the council chair, this chair, and that vice chair are meeting monthly now to communicate on these very issues. The city manager and I have talked several times, and I can tell you that we're well on the way to having the Public Works Department managing parks projects under our oversight, our being the director. So what you're talking about is already in progress. So I just want people to understand that we're working on these governmental confusion issues and the operational issues. I think continued work between the commission leadership, chair, vice chair, and the city manager, it was going to be very valuable to handling the communication issues to bring the right and left hand together already. I mean, we're already moving that direction, and the whole point of the build up to the ordinance, as the mayor has pointed out, was to solve a lot of these problems. And I understand that in the transition from the old way to the new way, and then entertaining the idea of hiring a director before we have redefined the job needs to be dealt with. So I'm just going to leave it right there. Anybody else? Councilor Bloom, you
I just
finish
wanted
it
to-
up.
Just briefly to Councilor Hanson's point, which is a very valid one, is we still have the millage in the charter that doesn't exist anymore. I think we can all agree probably needs to be cleaned up.
Well, there's work to be done, just not at this meeting. Okay, so I think that's it for the first part of the evening. Yes, it is. So I'm going to adjourn the joint session and take 15 minutes, which would be about 8 o'clock. We'll call it 12 minutes to be back here for the commission business meeting. Thank you. Welcome back to the second meeting of the evening. This one is the Park Commission Business Meeting of February 11th, 2026. We do not need another, I'm orienting myself on my agenda here. Do not need another roll call. Okay, approval of minutes. We have item 9 on the overall agenda. Park Commission Study Session, January 7th, 2026. Park Commission Regular Business Meeting, January 14th. Are there any corrections or no? Then I'll ask for unanimous consent. Hearing no objection, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. We have no additions or deletions to the agenda, which takes us to a public forum for which there are no speakers. Consent agenda, which is approval of bylaws of the Ashland Senior Advisory Committee and acknowledgement of Recreation Advisory Committee meeting minutes of October 16th, 2025. Commissioner Lunt?
Is moving for approval.
Thank you. Does anybody want to pull either item and discuss it? No? Okay. Commissioner Lunt?
I move to approve and acknowledge the consent agenda as appropriate.
Let's do both, yes.
A second.
Any discussion? Not seeing any interest in that. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Gardner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Bachmann.
Yes.
All yes, motion passes.
That takes us to item 13. I have to read Roman numerals now beyond 10. Business, we have 2 items. First one is Park Commission 2026 liaison assignments, which, as I discussed last week, I am not offering any changes, and I didn't hear from anyone that they need them. So the assignments are in the packet, and I think we can deal with this on unanimous consent. And any objections to unanimous consent? Hearing none, the liaison assignments are approved by unanimous consent. That brings us to our second and final business item, the Calle Guanajuato agreements. And Acting Director Dials will present that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bachmann. This evening, tonight I'm seeking approval for 9 requests for space on the Calle Guanajuato and the front of Lithia Park. These are the 9 requests here. This year I'm asking for a change based on feedback that we have received from restaurants on the Calle, as well as the Artisans Market. The 2026 boundary map for the Calle this year, which you see in front of you, depicts current restaurant spaces, which are in red, as well as green spaces that depict a pilot project for more restaurant space this summer. The feedback that myself and the city manager's office have received from everyone, basically, is to remove the artisans from the interior of the Calle and provide restaurant owners with more seating capacity on the busiest days of the week. This would reduce the burden on restaurants for reconfiguring seating every weekend, and the artisans would continue to be anchored at the Calle entrances. By consolidating the artisan market vendors into one location, it will integrate the market with Lithia Park and allow a stronger branding and visual presence for the Lithia Artisans Market. These are the maps that we're looking at for a small market and a larger market. Staff is recommending a 1-year trial period pilot project of moving the artisans into the park. I did consult with the parks team, and they did express concerns related to soil compaction around the perimeter of the front lawn and the parking strip, as well as the south side near the ash trees. Staff's recommendation would be to work with the artisans market to ensure the booths stay clear of tree roots by marking areas where the artisans can place booths. All other proposed actions, so the requested actions, are the same as previous years, and I would request a separate motion for each of the items tonight. And I wanted to invite Deputy City Manager Jordan Brooklyn up to talk about any thoughts you might have.
No thoughts, but happy to answer questions.
And that's what I have tonight. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. So basically, the artisans won't have any spots on the calle.
They would have spots at the top of the calle, so near Mix, and then they would have spots around the community development building and in the parking lot adjacent there, and then it would flow across the street into the park.
And that's their preference?
I've spoken with the artisans on 3 different occasions, and they put together a whole proposal on it. We spoke and we kind of talked through some issues and concerns, and decided that, if we could try it for this year and see how it goes, and then next year revisit it, and if we need to revert back, talk about that.
And then just one follow-up. If you could go to the next slide with showing the where the artisans are in the front. So
This would be the small market configuration, and then this one would be the large. And I just want to say that the large is like, they've never had this many artisans at a market before, so this is just like something they would hope to do someday. For this summer, it's most likely not going to happen. And if you look at the orange umbrellas, that's the south side where the ash trees are. And that's the concern. That whole side is what the park staff was talking about as far as their concerns related to the ash trees and the roots. And so we would look at coming up with a schematic that would work for everyone.
So let me follow on. Are you done?
One more question.
Oh, okay, you go.
So did we have to get permission from the city then to use in front of ComDev and that?
My understanding is that the artisans have a conditional use permit for use of those other areas.
And then I would just point out that it doesn't, their booths don't go all the way to the entrance of Lithia Park, which was a concern to me over
Right.
past years. Where
If
they
you
kind of-
notice in the
They crowded out the entrance to the
Yes,
park.
on the right side, on the slide, you'll notice there's 2 red areas where booths will not be allowed. And that is the entrance, that entrance area that you're talking about, where you can see the Lydia Park sign. And that has been addressed.
Thank you. Done.
I have a couple questions, and then I believe Commissioner Lonk does as well. The orange umbrellas, can we accommodate the artisans without even offering those this year as locations?
Sorry, you
Well,
mean
the-
that whole area? Yeah, we'll just need to,
I mean, if we just put that off limits this year, is it going to impact their ability to?
no, we just would look at some reconfiguring.
Okay.
So moving it away from the ash trees.
So, yeah, that's just off limits
yeah.
already. Okay, good. And then,
Do you mind if I add a little context to that?
okay, let me just ask one more thing, and then maybe this will be part of what you can speak to. The impetus for this, I take it, is clearing up the Guanajuato Way so that the restaurants can have a higher utilization back in there?
That's correct, as well as on weekends when we have shared spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the restaurants have to move tables on the weekends, and there's 2 different restaurants that it affects.
Okay.
And allowing them to just leave their tables up and move the artisans out gives everybody a nicer experience.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Jordan, why don't you?
Thank you. I just love to speak because Rachel invited me to be included on the Lithia Artisans Market conversations, and as well as contact all the restaurants that applied. And one thing I just want to be clear, the reason we want to pilot this shape, including with the umbrella section, is because that was the Lithia Artisans Market goal, is to have a fully connected market. And there's concern that if we remove that orange section, for lack of a better phrase, the umbrellas, we'll have vendors that are so far down there too disconnected from natural pedestrian pathways. So their request was to, on smaller market days, was actually cut across the middle of the lawn. I will say Deputy Director and I both had concerns because the lawn itself has high use as a gathering space. So our agreements with the artisan market is we'll continue to work with them throughout this season and just trial and error it to find the best solution that's best for the trees, the lawn, as well as the vendors.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lunt? No? Yes.
If you go back to that slide, please.
That one?
The other one, please. The other way. Thank you. I noticed that the broad walkway that goes from Juanwato Way to the park by Scout, the big sidewalk area there, the big broad area that in the past has had 2 or 3 vendors, shows none this year. Could you help me understand why?
So we actually didn't fill in that spot, but there would be vendors there. So you're talking about the opening by the bench and the trash can?
Yeah.
Yeah, there would be vendors there. We just didn't fill it in.
Okay. The reason what I'm thinking is we have kind of a half inch in 3 days of rain keeps people off the lawn. That's never really been tested. I know where it came from. I suggested it initially, but it was just, I just came up with that so we'd have something. But to my knowledge, no one's ever looked at that to say, hey, that's adequate or not. But the more spaces that are available that don't include being on the lawn, and in fact, I would like to see that the spaces that are not on the lawn in the more off-season when there aren't so many vendors get filled up before they start using the lawn spaces. And I don't think that's part of our contract, is it?
It's not currently.
Yeah, I really think that should be because this is hard on the lawn, and it's always a trade-off. We want to be supportive of our lithium artisan market because it's an amenity for our town. But at the same time, we should do it in an intelligent way. And one way to be intelligent is just to stay off of the lawn unless we have to be on it. And again, this isn't talking about this configuration. It's talking about 6 months of the year when there's really only a dozen or more vendors out there. And there's just no reason in that situation why they should be on the lawn. And so I would hope that would be added to the contract. And then I'd like to further speak to staff has pointed out there's always cost and benefit. The benefit of this is it's really helping our vendors and more importantly, I think in this case, the restaurateurs who've had a tough year. No snow, no Mount Ashland, no ice rink. So if we can do something to support that, I'm glad we can. But what hasn't been really talked about is the other, on the con side, is what this would do under this configuration shown on the screen currently, what this would do to that area that is very well used for informal, unorganized recreation. People picnicking, throwing frisbee, just doing all the kinds of things that people do in a park. And this will really limit that ability to do that. It's only a couple days a week, but it's on the days when working people don't have to work. So I think it's kind of important that be considered. So I'm glad this is only a pilot, and I probably am going to, kind of say, okay, I really want to be supportive of the restaurateurs, particularly this year, and I could see it as a pilot. But I think we really need to actually come back with some data next year to see what effect does this had on just people using one of the most used parts of our park. And we're changing the ability to use that. Yeah, I guess that's enough. Oh, one last thing. Again, trying to get our vendors onto hardscape is really, again, I think should be a priority. And we're moving them off of Hanawata Way, a hardscape. And so we kind of somewhat limited our hardscape. And since we're trying to work together with the city, this might be a good time to be talking with the city about using the plaza for part of the artisan market. I think there's still room on park property and on at the community development and the parking lot. It isn't like there probably isn't even room to move everything over there, but I think moving part of it to that area would be a real positive. And I would like to see the city working on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Lott. And I'll share that was part of our conversations with the Artisans Market. Their main goal for this year is to be a really consolidated group, and so they didn't want to have a separate group on the plaza. But what we're talking about is piloting for First Friday, having some vendor dispersion across our downtown area to help draw people to other parts of downtown as well. So I'm hopeful that the plaza might be a part of that. Certainly also 3rd Street and things down further on that end. So thank you. We are thinking alike and really hoping to get in a lot more vibrancy specifically on our plaza, since I think that's really an underutilized space.
Commissioner Adams.
Yeah, thanks so much. I want to echo some of what my colleague Commissioner Lott shared. I think it's great that we're looking for opportunities to help out the restaurateurs who've had a hard year. Can we go back 2 slides? Sorry, maybe one more. That's what I'm looking for. I spent enough time down there that I should have encyclopedic knowledge, but could somebody help me with where we currently have artisan booths in this schema?
So in the schema you're looking at, they would be pretty much all of the green section.
Okay.
So that's the pilot project that we're looking at, having some other restaurants. And we have a new restaurant that opened about a year ago, Cafe Lumina, who wants more space in the back. Little Tokyo is back there in that area, as well as Scout. And yeah, so all the green areas would be expanded restaurant space. And there's about, I think, 10 artisan booths that take up that spaces that would move out to either the lawn or the paved area.
Second question, if I may continue, Chair. What was because I hear consolidation, that makes sense to me. Why do we still have those 2 little tiny dots of purple? Is that we have 2 particular vendors that have that spot? Okay.
They like the that's kind of like the greeting to the market.
The
So.
cool little quirky signs.
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
one of
And I will say our restaurateurs also love them because
Uh-huh.
they help draw people to the back of the kayak.
Gotcha.
And that's why it was really important in our conversation with both groups to keep the folks that are in front of Mix and the beautiful paintings, et cetera, that are on that sidewalk leading up to Scout.
Yeah. The other thing that occurs to me, and this is like maybe the science brain coming in when we're thinking about monitoring impacts. If we can go ahead to that full triangle, the front of the park slide.
The large market.
The enlarged market. I think what's tricky to my brain is, when you do a science experiment, you gather data, you do an intervention, and then you gather the data again, and you see how the intervention changes stuff. And so, when I'm thinking about Commissioner Lott's point about picnickers and Frisbee players and stuff like that, we can gestalt it, but we can't really get any data. I think at very minimum, some good photographs of what the lawn looks like at the beginning and what it looks like at the end. I think for the record, I think it's possible that we could do something like this without having a whole lot of additional impact. I mean, at Hawthorne Park in Medford, they drive vehicles onto the grass for Pete's sake, for sort of peak market weeks. There's a good part of the time where it's just in the parking lot. But I mean, they have big trucks on the grass, and I mean, they probably use a whole bunch of greenifying chemicals there that we don't use in Ashland, but the lawn does okay. So I think there's a chance that the lawn does okay, but I hope that at very minimum, we're doing some good aerial photos before, some good aerial photos afterwards, and then we'll just have to gestalt it, I guess, as to the number of picnickers and the number of Frisbee players. And, you know, at very minimum, we do have a couple of other lawns, you know, below the bottom of the screen where people can throw Frisbees and picnic in the shade and stuff like that too. But I know people love the front of the park. I love the front of the park. So.
And I just want to share talking with staff too. We walked through with particular Lithia Park staff for the specific lawn too. And part of this purpose of this pilot is we're recognizing changes may want to be made to that lawn in the relatively medium term future. One, those ash trees are under threat with the emerald ash borer. And two, that poor lawn has just been, you know, could use some reseeding or some change of undergrowth. So we're hoping this can give us some good information around, is it used this way? Would we want to look at a different redesign, et cetera, for you all to consider down the line?
Okay. Commissioner Gardner, anything? Okay. Can we see the motions? Yes, thank you.
I have one on that too, so when you get there.
So any more questions before we have motions and deliberation? No? Okay. Oh,
You guys, I'm just going to take liberty to say, I just have a quick clarification, / recommendation on the half-inch rain metric. Are you comfortable if I share those thoughts?
sure.
Great. I would recommend the Lithia Artisans Market has been really great to work with and are really willing to be flexible with us this year. And they know one of our concerns is that lawn health. So I would recommend in the motion on the next slide, rather than being so specific around the amount of rain that falls, I would say just add language that's, you know, subject to approval by park staff for when the lawn is usable.
So which one are we talking about? The first bullet here?
That first one. Yeah, just to make it a little more general so the park staff can have a little bit more leeway on making the column when the grass needs rest.
You want to make a motion or are you going to clarify something with Jordan?
Well,
Do we have 4 motions here?
yeah. This is just a point, the same way that Jordan Brooklyn just made a point. I'd like to make a point.
Okay.
I think on this third one, I think that's fine to move the, to take the half inch out. And, you know, and again, it might change if we had a different managers of the artisan market who weren't so conscientious. That might have to change, but under our current, we can, if we have to, we can make that change. But but I do think that giving them some direction on using hardscape locations would be okay. And what I would, but with the exception, I think they should use hardscape locations before filling lawn locations, except for the use of the park row. And I think that I know the manager, and I think that he would. I've talked with him extensively, and I think he would agree. This really wouldn't be a problem, and so that's what I'd like to.
Well, let's move ahead and make the motions.
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion.
Then we'll deliberate on those items. Okay, so
Well,
let's go
actually,
back to the beginning, and let's move through it sequentially. Okay, first motion. Commissioner Lott?
I'm working on the.
You're working on the third. Okay, Commissioner Adams.
I'll work on the first two while Rick is machinating on the language.
Excellent. Teamwork.
I move to approve the 2026 Kaye-Guanajuato boundary map.
Second.
You'd like to speak to your motion?
I've already said what I need to say.
Okay,
Thank you.
Commissioner Gardner? Anyone else? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Lund,
yes.
Commissioner Bachmann,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Gardner.
Yes.
All yes, motion passes.
Second bullet. Commissioner Adams? This is your page.
I move to approve an 8-month season, March 9th to November 8th, 2026, a 9.5 month season, March 9th to December 31st, 2026, and an off-season use from January 1st, 2026 to March 9th, 2027. March 9th, 2027.
Oh, I'm sorry, that should be 2027.
Okay. March 9th, 2026, giving restaurants the option to extend the months of the season of operation with a plan in place by November 8th to remove equipment, chairs, tables, etc. if a flood threatens.
I'll second this one. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Bachmann,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Gardner.
Yes.
All yes, motion passes.
Ready?
I hope.
Commissioner Long.
Just give me a half second to read. Okay. Move to approve the Lithia Artisan Market use of the front of Lithia Park during the regular season of March through November 8th, with no use of grass areas when APRD staff determines the damage to lawns would be significant. Locations for the booths will be marked by APRD staff. The hardscape areas will be filled before filling lawn locations except for the park row locations.
I second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Bachmann,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Gardner,
Yes.
Commissioner Lund.
Yes.
All yes, motion passes.
Thank you. And we have one more.
I move to approve the 9 requests listed in the staff report for the Kaye Wanawato for the 2026 season.
Second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Lund,
Yes.
Commissioner Bachmann,
Yes.
Commissioner Adams,
Yes.
Commissioner Gardner.
Yes.
All yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
Can I just say, Deputy Director and Acting Director Dials, I love those photos on the first page. The little pigtails
great.
and just the body language of that little girl who's entering the Kaye is just like, it just
We're
makes
talking.
me happy.
Those are good pictures.
Right next to the mural.
Yep.
Juxtaposed. Okay. That brings us to items from commissioners and staff. Seeing none, we move on to the next item, 15, which is upcoming meeting dates. Park Commission study session, March 4th. These are all 2026. Park Commission regular business meeting, March 11th. Park Commission study session, April 1st. Park Commission regular business meeting, April 8th. Ashland Senior Advisory Committee meeting, April 13th, 2026. I forgot it was the same year. That would probably be at the Senior Center.
Correct.
And the Recreation Division Advisory Committee will meet where?
The Grove.
At the Grove on April 16th. Meeting adjourned.